Hi everyone. So I'm going to be adding, rather working on Somaya's project, so that way we can do some refactoring and changing the existing project. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be adding a feature where if I go to a page which is behind authentication, but if I'm not authenticated, I get redirected to the login page. But once I log in, I want to go back to the page that I came from. Right? So does anyone have any ideas on what we can do? Or how we can go about trying to implement this?
Somehow saving the path and pushing that URL.
Right. All right. So to do. So we need to save the old URL, essentially, or the URL that the user went to before getting redirected to
We
the
talked about using referrers.
using referrer.
Yeah.
So okay, possible solution using referrer. Okay. A single R. Okay. Okay. What else? So let's say we have access to the URL somehow, right? We either save it in the referrer or we have it somewhere else. What do we do once we have it? So what is the behavior that we want?
To keep track of the previous. You want to keep track of the previous page.
Right. So let's assume that we have that. We have somehow access to the URL that the user originally came to, and then we get redirected to the login page. The user logs in. Then what happens?
Back to that URL.
So what is going back to mean? Like we have to redirect, right? So once the user logs in, we redirect back to the URL saved. So let's call it like redirect URL. Right. So now we need to figure out how to save the URL. So possible solution is referrer. So let's look at what referrer is. So HTTP referrer header. So the referrer request header contains the address of the previous web page from which the link to the currently requested page was followed. So this usually just works for links. So that means if I click on a link here, HTTP headers, by default when I do this, there would be a header set saying referrer, and the current URL would be added to that header. So that way, it's useful for analytics, for saying that how many people are coming to this page and where are they coming from. So based on, if they're going through a click, I don't know if anyone has used Google Analytics. So Google Analytics can kind of tell you like how are people coming to your page. A lot of people see searches, but a lot of people, like if there's links to your website, then you can like see how many people are coming from like those sources. So that's how they figured it out, using the referrer. So this may not work for us because nobody is clicking, right? We're submitting a form, which is slightly different. If it was a link, we could have done it. Okay, so this may not work, right? So any other suggestions?
No, there's a location header, but isn't that where your redirect gets to?
Window, you're saying, yeah. That's like, yeah, it's either the current or the one that you're going to. So what are the ways that we can save information on a browser? So cookies is a solution. Okay, what else? Or let me ask you another question. What are the different ways that the browser can send information to a server? Okay, so we can use query params. Okay, what are the other ways to send information? So there's query params, there's URL params, and then there's body params in the case of post requests, right? So now you have, okay, so query params is an easy solution. So cookies is definitely a solution that we can use, but it feels like there's a little bit of extra management that we have to do for cookies, which is like I have to like create the cookie and then set the cookie and then delete the cookie, all these like different operations, which is kind of feels a lot more work than it should be. So I'm going to say too hard. So rejected. So query parameters, URL parameters, and body parameters seems a lot more easier because they're just like so easy to add. I can just add a query parameter. I can just add a URL parameter. But what is the advantage of using one over the other? So what is the difference between a query parameter and a URL parameter?
Isn't a query parameter something that was submitted via get me?
Okay. Well, query parameters can exist for post requests too, right? They just so query parameter looks like this, right? Localhost 3000. Let's say dashboard, and then I can say age equal to 10, right? A URL param looks like something like this, where this is internally mapped to age, whereas here I'm being explicit by the key. It's like a key and value, whereas in the case of the URL parameter, it's just a value, right? I don't have any idea of what it is just by looking at the URL, but my app will have the information about what it is, right? So in my app, I would have something like, app.get dashboard, something like this, right? So my app is going to make sense of it. Same thing with here too. It's just like my app still has to make sense of what this is, but at least like I can have, like, this is optional, right? This age equal to 10 is optional, right? Age is an optional param. Whereas in this case, 10 is mandatory. Like if I don't put the 10 in there, it's not even gonna recognize the route, right? Because it expects this age thing to exist. So going back to our original problem, we have this idea that we need to save this URL, redirect URL, but this is optional, right? Redirect URL is optional. That means that the user doesn't always have the redirect URL. The user may directly go to the login page. Then we just redirect to the dashboard page by default. But if the user goes to another page, then we have to save that. So it's not always that we have a redirect URL. So feels like the use case for query parameters seems a good fit because query parameters are optional, whereas URL parameters are mandatory. So I feels like we have more choice with a query parameter, where we can choose to handle it in however we want. Okay, so we decided with query parameters. So how do we add a query parameter to a URL? So let's say, step 1, user goes to HTTP localhost 3000/profile page, right? User is without authentication. Then user is redirected to localhost 3000/login, and then user logs in by submitting the form. Then user gets redirected to localhost 3000/dashboard. Right, this is the current behavior of my website. By default, everybody gets redirected to like the dashboard page, right, when they log in. But what I actually want is user to be redirected to profile, right? Because that was what they originally wanted to go to. So somehow in the middle of this, once the user goes here, somehow, okay, if this is actually 2, 3, 4, I need a 1.5 in here where I save localhost 3000/profile to, in our case now, a query parameter, right? So somehow I want this information to be in my query parameter. And then I want to propagate so I'll call the query parameter redirect URL, right? So I would say redirect URL equal to this value, and then somehow propagate the redirect URL query parameter. So that way it continuously keeps going forward until, so even here, propagate. Everywhere I want to propagate. And then once the user logs in, and then since I have the redirect URL, instead of redirecting to localhost 3000, redirect to redirect URL, since I have propagated it, if exists. And it may not exist. So if not, then redirect to /dashboard. Everyone with me so far? So this is kind of like the solution that we're going to go with, which is we save the URL that the user goes to, and then we somehow create a parameter, query parameter called redirect URL, and then we propagate that down every time. And finally, when the user gets redirected, instead of redirecting to the standard /dashboard, we check to see if there is a query parameter called redirect URL, and if it exists, we just redirect to that one.
Sorry, that's really
Oh yeah. Who is somebody on the phone? Oh. Okay.
Is query parameter and query string interchangeable or the same thing?
Query string is, so query string is the whole set of parameters, right? So I could have more than one parameter. So I could have age equal to 10 and height equal to like 5 or something. Together, they're called the query string. But query parameter is an individual parameter. Okay, cool. So everybody with me so far? Questions about our process?
We're recording this, right?
Yes. But you can still ask me questions.
I know.
Okay. Cool. So let's start hacking. So this is Somaya's project. So
We can use this also essentially our own just better.
okay,
Either way.
that's fine. We can use this. So is npm run start dev?
It's just normal. Well, either.
3000 is in use. No, it's not use. Okay. So localhost 3000. I think I have a foobar user. Okay, so that worked. So now it logged into, I went to the / page. Is there Okay, so let's say I go to the new contact page, right? So new contact page redirects me to the login page, but if I log in, it redirects me to the home page. So that's the behavior, right? So instead of like dashboard here, it's redirecting me to slash, right? And then this is auth/login, and here I want to go to the contact/new, right? I want to go here, but then it redirects me to also save contact/new to the query parameter, and then it gets redirected to the login page, and then I want to get redirected back to contacts new. Cool. So let's see where to begin. So server routes auth.
It's a bunch of unnecessary things.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, so when somebody, so where is the login middleware? The one that checks.
Probably in the index. That was my first thought.
Okay, it's logged in. Cool. So here, we are response redirecting to auth login, right? But what we want is when the user is redirected, propagate the redirect URL, right? So that means at this point, we need to send the redirect URL because this is the point where we are redirecting. And what is the problem with redirecting? What happens to the old request? It's gone, right? So if I come from localhost 3000 and I go to /profile and that's my current URL, but when I redirect, I've lost that request completely because now it's like a new request going to the server. So at this point is when I need to like give information about what I'm doing. So here I can say so const current URL equal to request dot, I don't know, what is the value of, how do I get the current URL out? Let's see, API guide, request, base URL, original URL. Okay, so original URL is like request.url. Okay, request.url.
Can you just get the path and set the whole URL of localhost?
Yeah, you can. So I guess request.url is that, right? So let's see. So if I say request.url and it's console.log current URL is current URL.
That's not the
So now if I go to log out and I go to new contact, so I get contacts new, right? So here, so how do I propagate this now to my redirect? So I have the current URL, but how do I send it across to my auth login?
You just add a query in your redirect. You can say auth login query current URL.
Right. So I can say redirect URL equal to current URL. Right, so now, but the problem with this is if I don't have a current URL, I guess it's fine. It's always going to have redirect URL. Because if I directly go to the login page, then this won't get triggered. Okay, never mind. I was just thinking of the edge case when we don't have to redirect, we don't have a redirect URL. but that's never going to happen. Okay, so we have a current URL. That's cool. So now when we go to our auth login, which is in our auth page, so when we render this page, let's console.log redirect URL request dot param no query dot right. So let's see what we get. So if I directly go to this page, redirect URL is undefined, right? Because we didn't get one. But if I go to contact/new, then I get redirect URL is that and redirect URL is that. Everyone with me? So we were able to propagate it to the next step, right? So going back to our thing, we were able to propagate the redirect URL to auth login. So we're good. So now what happens is the user actually logs in, right? They type in the username and password and click on submit. So that means we have to propagate this in the form submission. How do we do that? So we are rendering this login page here, correct?
Yeah.
So what does the login page have? So let's look at the login page. So we have views, login. So we have a form, and we have an action, and we have some input fields, and we have a submit. Yeah, submit button. So how do we propagate the redirect URL in this part? In the action?
Yeah,
And what do we do in the action?
they do that same thing off login and then the question mark URL.
Right, so equal to something.
Not sure if we, I guess, we definitely have it. I'm just not exactly sure.
Right, so I can do this, and then here, I can do that. So let's see what happens. So let's inspect this element. So here you go. Does everyone see this? So we have the redirect URL set to contacts new. Right, so now we're propagating this as well downstream. So now what happens when I submit? Foo bar, it logs into the home page because we haven't really used the redirect URL yet. Right, so when we do the post for our login, we are always redirecting to the slash page. Right, which is why it's going to the home page, right? I mean the root page, because we are always redirecting to slash no matter what happens. Instead, what do we do now? And how do we get the contacts new?
Say like if request.query.redirect URL and go there,
right?
Also go to the home page.
Right. Okay, so instead of using an if, we can use an or statement. So we can say redirect URL is equal to request.query.redirect URL or slash. And then we just say that. So we log out. So let's go to the new contact page. I get that. I say foo bar contacts new. So let's look at some edge cases, right? So what happens if I directly just log in? Does it do something funky? So it goes to the home page. And cool. That was it. That's how you implement redirect. Questions about this? So if we go back to our steps that we did, do you think we got everything covered? So user goes to the page which is behind authentication, and then we somehow save the redirect URL to a query parameter, right? And then the user is redirected to the login page, and then we propagate the redirect URL, and we did this using the forms action, right? And this we changed the is logged in function to propagate or to actually create the query parameter, right? So we use the forms action, and then when we submitted the form, the action, the query parameter was in the request /sign login request or auth login request post, and that's it. And because we had it, we were able to then use it in our function. Right, so going back to the code again, let's like review. So we had, was it index you said? Yeah. Okay, so it is logged in. We got the URL, the current URL. So from the current URL, we propagated that and we created a query parameter called redirect URL. Because we are redirecting to a new page, we need to send that across. And the only way to send that across, or like one of the ways to send that across is using a query parameter. So once we did that, we now have it available in the login page. So in our login page, we now have query.redirect URL because it came from the other middleware. And now that we have that, we now have to propagate it to the view because now we want to modify the action for our form to contain the redirect URL. And once we have this, when we submit the form, this automatically gets submitted, and then now it's available as a query parameter in our post request. So notice how query parameters can exist even in a post request, right? They're in the URL. So anything which has a URL can have query parameters. And every request has a URL, so query parameters exist in all requests, right? So our post login now contains the redirect URL. Questions about this?
I'm just curious if it's okay to not have my URL to log in be /auth/login. I did it.
Yeah.
So then it's just /login.
Yeah. I would just do /login too. Somia just likes auth. Okay. We good? Questions? That's all I had. We finished pretty early. Thank you.